Well, good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to begin by thanking Catherine for that kind introduction. And listen, it's fantastic to be here at the International Economic Forum of the Americas for the planning of the 2023 Toronto Global Forum. We know that events like this just don't happen. What I experienced in terms of me being queued to the perfect second takes an incredible amount of work. So I just want to begin by thanking all those that have worked so hard to make this forum possible. I'm really happy to be here today and to be given an opportunity to say a few words to kick off this exciting discussion that is going to follow my remarks. Let me begin by saying, as a daughter of a steelworker, I've seen firsthand how strong industries can create strong communities. As a proud Hamiltonian, I can say, without a doubt, that our steel mills helped build Hamilton to the great city that it is today. Well-paying jobs in the steel industry that people could ensure that people could afford to put food on the table and provide a roof over their head. My own family experience was my dad worked in steel throughout his whole life. My mom dabbled in steel. But each of their children, my siblings, we all worked in steel in order to help us get an education. And it, ensured that parents could provide for their children and more. It helped build our middle class. And the wonderful thing about these industries is that they can adapt and that they can thrive. When you look at the place that I worked, ArcelorMittal Dofasco, now they're converting to green steel, absolutely fantastic. And so when we see in Hamilton this transition that's happening, we see a similar thing happening across Ontario. Companies are transitioning to greener manufacturing, which is leading to significant growth and revitalization of the sector. We're seeing this as well throughout Canada as industries grow to meet the challenge of the 21st century. Sustainable and inclusive growth, creating good jobs to support workers and their families. It is happening in Hamilton, it is happening in Ontario, and it is happening all across Canada. And we're very excited to be a part of it. I'm witnessing the same kind of evolution in the auto sector too. We all know that EVs are truly the road ahead for the automotive industry and the Canadian economy. And I can tell you that the Government of Canada fully supports the growth of the EV industry. We're making significant investments in the EV space. These investments offer generational opportunities, and we are seizing these opportunities. And so, in reference to that amazing panel that we just heard, working hard to provide that stability that is needed. And I think that following my remarks, the discussion that is going to take place today is going to be an amazing one where I think opportunities are going to be recognized and seized. Our government has set ambitious targets to reduce our emissions by at least 40% by 2030. A large part of the mission is to put more electric vehicles on the road. That's why we set a requirement that at least 20% of new vehicles sold be EVs by 2026. That's going to increase annually to 60% by 2030 and 100% by 2035. Yes, these targets are ambitious, but they're possible. We have the workers, the talent, the resources, and the stability required to make Canada a global EV superpower. But in order to do this, we must take a collaborative approach. All levels of government need to work together with industry leaders to find solutions that work for everyone. And as the minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, this is my top priority. That's why I was recently in Niagara region to announce a $300,000 investment to accelerate the growth of the EV sector. And we've made similar investments in Windsor and in London. These communities will show the world what we can do with EVs. We know Ontario is a renowned hub for the automotive manufacturing as well as innovation. 95% of Canadian automotive parts and supplier facilities are located in Southern Ontario. Thanks to the work of industry leaders, we are well positioned to create that end-to-end, made-in-Canada supply chain for the EV sector. That's my goal and that's my dream. It's no wonder that companies like Volkswagen in St. Thomas, Umicore in Kingston, Stellantis in Windsor are all setting up shop or expanding their operations right here in our province. Across Ontario, we're seeing more and more companies turn to EV manufacturing. Magna launched a facility earlier this year in Brampton that's going to support the production of the new Ford F-150 Lightning. Honda's working towards becoming a fully electric vehicle producer by 2040. In fact, earlier this summer, their Alliston plant celebrated the production of their 10th millionth vehicle and marked that milestone by producing a hybrid vehicle. APMA is another great Canadian success story that developed the first Canadian-made zero-emissions concept vehicle, Project Aero, which our government supported with an investment of over $5 million. All these global companies are choosing Southern Ontario for a reason. Not Europe, not America, but Southern Ontario. That's because we know that we have the best workforce, top industry leaders, and the expertise to get the job done right. And they are generating growth and creating countless good-paying jobs, not just in their communities, but across the province and across the country. We are rebuilding the Canadian auto sector because this is a challenge that we need to face head-on if we're going to grow a clean economy. Looking around at all of you in this room and at this forum today, those that have joined online, I know we have the potential to create these possibilities. Your hard work and determination will ensure that the EV industry in Ontario can continue and can thrive. I know it because I'm visiting companies across Southern Ontario. I am in awe at the innovation and the creativity, the ability to look ahead, to come up with new ideas, new ways of doing things, and to really be driven by that challenge. The talent and the opportunity is endless. To be honest, I don't know how anyone can say this country is broken. It's the exact opposite. We are full of potential, of talent, of ability, and desire to seize these opportunities. You are all incredible proof of the power our country has when we work together to build each other up. Let's build each other up. Let's seize the opportunities. Let's support each other and celebrate in our successes. Because when we support each other, a success for one is a success for all. Thank you for having me here today, and I thank you for the work that you are all doing to strengthen our economy. Now, back to you, Catherine, for a very exciting panel, The Road Ahead. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited. This is, I think, my 7th time at the Global Forum here in Toronto, so I'm very pleased to be here. First of all, I'd like to thank Minister Tassi for not only her attendance here today, but also for her inspiration and certainly her support of the Niagara region and Southern Ontario. I'd also like to thank all of you for attending the Toronto Global Economic Forum. We need participants to make this happen, and so I appreciate the opportunity to share some ideas, particularly the economic impacts of the EV sector on local municipalities, and I can only speak about one of them in particular, and certainly our Niagara region at the same time. So last year, I think a lot of you had been here before. Last year, when we were talking about EVs, it seemed like we were talking about something that was in the distant future. And when I say distant future, 2030, 2035, into that range. Fast forward to this year, and it's at the forefront. Not only are we speaking about it again and ongoing discussions, but it's already happening. There's a rush to get this thing to happen. So we're experiencing this rapid arrival of all things EV on a global scale. And what's happening that I'm seeing is that companies, businesses are getting contracts for parts, for batteries, for all sorts of the components that go into it. And they're now rushing to get facilities built in order to meet those goals. So, timing is of the essence in this particular case. So when we look at the economic impacts of municipalities, as I say, I'll speak specifically of the Niagara region and the city of Welland and the other municipalities within Niagara. we see this as the importance of this to us economically is just the same as it is for the auto industry and for the residents of the global world, really. And it's about, for us, it's very transitional. We have been in Niagara struggling in the past, trying to get industry. We worked together. I've worked with the Niagara region, with upper levels of government. Certainly, Minister Tassi, you've provided us with great guidance, and your words were very inspirational for us today as well. So, Welland is in the heart of the Niagara region. And what we're seeing is this industrial renaissance. And when we look at the EV sector, this transitional mode, or what we're doing now, is going to accelerate that exponentially. When we look at the Niagara region, it's centrally located. We have access to multimodal transportation. We're the place to be. So what we've done from a municipal perspective, is we have to differentiate ourselves. It's highly competitive to where these facilities are going to be located. Everybody wants them. How do you get them? So from our perspective, because of the economic impacts, what we've done is we've differentiated ourselves from other areas. And so I'm letting the cat out of the bag here for everybody, but this is what we're doing. And I think most other municipalities are going to start to do the same thing. The first and foremost is working with upper levels of government, making the connections as we see that we've done here. So we're looking provincially, we're looking federally, but we also have to look internally from a Niagara regional perspective. We all have to work together to make things happen. And so one of the things that has happened in Niagara is to differentiate ourselves. We come up with a suite of incentives. We have exceptional incentive programs to attract, but also once we attract, to maintain these industries. And it's starting to work. It has worked in this industrial renaissance that we're seeing, more and more companies coming into the Niagara area. So one of the things that we've done, there are several incentives. One of them is a TIG, or tax incentive programs, for part of our gateway CIPs, which is very attractive. You can get up to 10 years tax rebates, essentially, which is a huge incentive, gives you 10 years to get your feet on the ground before you have to start paying taxes. We also have initiatives including brownfield incentives, development charges reductions, among a whole bunch of other things. So when we put all of these packages together in our partnerships with upper levels of government, we become an area that can be and should be, and I'm expecting will be, a center for this type of development or industry. So one of the other things that we have, and I can speak specifically of Welland, but it's in partnership with the Niagara region, is that we just heard time is everything in this industry. People need to get these facilities built. They have to get them up and running. So what we've seen is that Welland has a reputation for issuing building permits very, very quickly. Our turnaround time is measured not in weeks as opposed to months or years. And when I say weeks, I'm seriously talking about weeks to getting, these large facilities in place. So we've seen this significant investment in the EV sector already. Companies like General Motors, Magna, Venest, EVSX, and most recently Linamar in the city of Welland. Linamar is currently constructing a new $250 million, 280,000 square foot state-of-the-art giga casting facility. Bit of a mouthful, but it's actually a very large project which will bring in 250 new well-paying jobs, tremendous spin-off economic activity. And for us, really important to us is we've had a lot of industries leaving our area, and it's coming back. So we do have available land. It's serviced, brownfield, industrial properties. And so this is repurposing that, or I guess reinvesting in it, so we can utilize these properties in order to make them work for us again. So we're really happy to have Linamar. We're hoping that we're expecting there will be more. We do in Niagara region have industrial land available, service industrial land. So we're ready to go, shovel ready. So we're well positioned to welcome a multitude of industries, and are especially excited about the opportunities afforded by the EV sector. So in closing, I would just like to thank the panelists and the moderator for their participation in the ensuing discussion, which I think we will find exciting, interesting, and certainly of great value as we move forward. So again, thank you all for listening to me, and I appreciate your patience in my speech, and also for attending here, and looking forward to seeing you again next year as we move on to more and more EV sector information. Thank you again.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Minister Tassi, Mayor Campion. That was an amazing setup. And we have a big topic to cover today, the impact of EVs on a global scale. Enough content to certainly fill a whole conference all on its own, but we will try our best to go over this in 40 minutes. I truly have the perfect group of people to speak to this topic today. I'm going to introduce everyone one by one and then give everyone a couple minutes to, give some of their opening remarks as well. So first, to my left, we have Brian Kingston, who is the president and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. You want me to jump right into it?
Jump right in, yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Appreciate the invitation. And look, I think it's pretty safe to say that it's an exciting time in the auto industry. It's an electrifying time. It is a period of massive transformation. And so global automakers right now have committed about $1.2 trillion to this technology. That's through 2030. And you're seeing it if you go by any local dealership. Every automaker now has an electrification strategy, which is a big change from even 5 years ago. In Canada, we've gone from 3 EV models in 2012. There are now 77, and we anticipate over 100 by the time we get through to the end of next year. And so this is creating huge economic opportunities for Canada in particular, because we have a number of resources that make us particularly attractive. First of all, we have 5 OEMs that manufacture here already, which is much more than what a lot of other jurisdictions and countries have. So we have an existing footprint with a labor pool and a long history of manufacturing. Secondly, we're totally integrated with the United States. 90% of our exports are going to the United States, and this is all underpinned by our trade agreements, which gives us access to the wealthiest market in the world. So that is a huge, huge advantage. And number 3, as we just heard from the minister and the mayor, we've got this amazing moment right now where we've got collaboration and cooperation between all levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal, which is helping to win investment and attract these mandates here to Canada. And then last, we have critical minerals. And this is where I see a huge economic opportunity for Canada. We have the minerals that are going to be needed in these batteries. So if we can build that supply chain out quickly, I think Canada is facing truly a generational economic opportunity. And I'm happy to get into that in our discussion. But all this to say, it's an exciting time, and the economic potential in this sector is absolutely massive right now.
Fabulous, thank you. Next, we have Raed Kadri, the head of the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network at the Ontario Centre of Innovation. Welcome.
Great, so much. Thank you so much. And, I think you're going to hear the same theme from all of us here. And Minister Tassi said it probably the best, but I'll try my best to reiterate it. What's going on right now, and I'll speak on Ontario, is incredible. On the global stage, we're being recognized as a leader in electric vehicles and in batteries. And if Minister Fedeli was here, he would tell you, a few years ago, we weren't even registering on the radar for Bloomberg and others. And now we're number 2. And I can tell you that we're likely to become number 1. Our province and our country, our governments are working together. We know that the transformation of the automotive sector is generational, as Brian mentioned, and we're going to ensure that we have that here in Ontario and in Canada to last us for years. I use the example, I'm from Windsor, Ontario. My father worked at Windsor Assembly Plant. One of Brian's members, Stellantis, at the time it was called Chrysler, built cars for 30 years. That fed, clothed, and educated me. These jobs are good paying jobs, and we're working tirelessly to make sure that across all levels of government, across all organizations, to make sure that at the end of the day, Canada remains on top on the global stage. That's on the manufacturing side. When it comes to technology, and as we look at the future of the automotive sector, and where OVIN, the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network, really plays a role, is integrating our manufacturing capabilities, our technological capabilities, and our mining capabilities all together, because that's what the world's looking for. And we have everything we need. We have an automotive sector and a manufacturing sector. We have capabilities that we build the highest quality vehicles of some companies' whole production system. Toyota builds Lexuses in Ontario. The only other place is in Japan. And so that's important to note about our workforce here. We have over 400 companies that are working on connected, autonomous, or electric vehicles in our province. And we have everything you need to build the batteries that will power the vehicles of the future here. So we've got everything we need to be leaders. We're working all together. And at the end of this, when it all shakes up, we will be on top. And this will last us for years to come.
Thank you. Rachel Duran is the Vice President of Policy and Strategy at Clean Energy Canada.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I might back up to the global picture for 1 second, because there's been a lot of great comments already about Ontario. Bloomberg recently wrote an article, the title said, "It's done. The future is the battery electric car." And we have seen that over time. So people talk about an S-curve. I was watching the roller coaster behind me here and thinking that's what we're seeing in electric cars. So every quarter that you're watching these things take off, we are seeing 70 times more vehicles globally today than there was in 2016. The forecasts are looking like 30% of total global vehicle sales in 2026. Up to 70% of new vehicle sales forecasted globally to be electric in 2030. These are big numbers. So obviously we're trying to figure out how to manage an industrial revolution of that size, both in the creation of new supply chains, in attracting the customers and understanding what are the needs, what are they looking for in these vehicles. But make no mistake, what Canada does or doesn't do, this is happening globally. And so then coming to Canada, we studied what the opportunity really is here. And I think it's been eloquently said, Bloomberg has ranked Canada as potential number 2. Great labor, access to critical minerals, the integrated supply chains. And we measured the total potential for Canada of that to be up to $48 billion in GDP and $250,000 jobs. But all that was on the best case scenario if governments did all that they could do to try to attract the best investments. I would hazard a guess that that research we did a year ago might even be a higher number if we looked at it today because of Canada's success in attracting the kinds of factories and investments that we've seen. But it really does take work. And I think that that's both through helping secure those investments, working with companies, what we've heard between all levels of government, as well as the supportive regulatory environment that I think we'll get into more in our panel.
Okay. Also joining us is Rasika Rahumatullah, the Manager of Government and Regulatory Affairs at Volkswagen Group Canada.
Hi. So Volkswagen Group is a really exciting place to be right now. Any massive transformation requires massive investment today, and we have a shared vision with many governments around the world, including Canada, for net zero by 2050. So what we're doing already is, you've already probably heard about our massive investment in St. Thomas, Ontario, to bring the batteries right here in Canada. And then we have our portfolio that's already here today, but will continue with more to come. So on the Volkswagen side, we have our all-electric ID4 SUV. We built it right here in the region so we could get sufficient inventory levels in Canada, US, and throughout the region. And then we also, on the Audi brand side, have a full lineup of e-tron models with more to come. So across the group, right here in North America, we're going to have 25 new EV models by 2030. But to make sure we get more Canadian and Americans driving these cars, we've also focused on the infrastructure side as well. So we didn't wait for government to make all the investments. We've been doing Electrify Canada here in Canada, and in partnership with Electrify America in the US, to build out a coast-to-coast cross-border charging network at the future-proof speeds we truly require, which is 150 kilowatts to 350. We need to kind of evolve past the 50 kilowatt mindset because most people don't want to spend more than 20 minutes in any place to charge their cars. So I think we're focusing on all the 3 pillars, and we've seen a lot of collaboration with the governments as well to kind of help build those pillars. So I think it's a very exciting time.
And I'm hoping that we could keep it with you, Rasika. What's been exciting, very exciting from like a policy perspective, specifically when it comes to kind of opening the floodgates for investment and development in this industry?
I think what's exciting about this is the first time we've seen so many different sectors have to come together. I mean, on the automotive side, we've never had to deal with utilities, critical minerals, mining, and the 3 levels of government to try and have all the moving pieces move together because we're all in the same dragon boat. So that's been interesting. And so I see so many different policy initiatives that could work. I think on the regulatory side, we already saw Quebec pass the most aggressive zero-emission vehicle mandate in North America. a few weeks ago, and we have the federal ZEV mandate coming imminently. So I think there's a lot of ambition we're seeing on the vehicle target side, but we need to see the same level of ambition on the infrastructure side. So a Team Canada approach where I would like to see policy KPIs that evolve behind just the numbers game of X thousand chargers, and more it's, hey, they're well located, they're at the right speeds for the future, so 150 to 350 kilowatts, and then addressing the barriers that a lot of people don't appreciate around what it makes for ultra-fast charging. So we need innovative provincial electricity rates that incentivize ultra-fast charging in the country. It's actually a very difficult business case for people to make those private investments until we solve those type of issues. And having provinces and municipalities work together to address like high-rise headaches or any mixed customer experiences, as we all hear about the Canada's housing crisis, and most developed nations are going to get more urbanized. We're going to see more high-rises, condos, apartments, and every new condo built should have level 2 charging, not just in like 10% of spots, but in my opinion, 100 if you want to hit 100%. Residential charging is the magic bullet to really get people into electric cars. So there's so many different pieces, and instead of having a fragmented duplication in all 3 layers of government, if we all got to the same table and said, how can I add the most value, and focus on KPIs that truly get Canadians into these vehicles, we can see like the adoption increase over time.
That's great. And I do want to hear from everyone on exactly what it is you all think needs to happen next. So thank you for kind of that introduction into what that conversation will look like. I do want to go back to something that you mentioned, Brian, about just the supply chain itself and the areas that you find particularly exciting and where you see a big opportunity for Canada right now, kind of in the immediate short-term future.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I'll just note that, if we'd been having this conversation a year ago, it would be a very different conversation because the United States Inflation Reduction Act really did tilt the table in terms of competitiveness towards the U.S. It's extremely aggressive and ambitious, $370 billion dedicated towards climate change. And Canada stepped up. The federal government, working with provincial governments, working with municipalities, has stepped up. And so what that has meant is that we have now seen over $30 billion in new automotive investment into Canada. A huge portion of that is dedicated to Ontario. And it's ultimately leading to your question, to the creation of a battery supply chain. So Ford is converting its Oakville facility to EV assembly. They've just announced an investment in Quebec where they're going to be preparing cathode materials. Stellantis, a $5 billion battery plant in Windsor, a massive investment, the likes we've never seen before. And General Motors is converting its facility in St. Catharines to build electric drive units. And this is all part of a $2 billion investment here in Canada, which includes the building and the assembly of the Bright Drop electric delivery van at Kami, as well as an investment in Quebec in cathode anode material. So what you're seeing is when you have these major global automakers that have footprints here investing in battery and vehicle assembly, it has this massive spin-off effect throughout the supply chain. We always use the job multiplier figure of 7 to 10 jobs created by every single direct assembly job. And you're seeing that in action right now. As these investments move forward, it creates a whole supply network. And again, as I said at the outset, I think the opportunity, particularly as we look further and further upstream into critical minerals, we have a window here to take more of that supply chain. The United States, under the Inflation Reduction Act, has put forward very specific sourcing requirements for these materials. Canada is in the tent. We're in the North American tent. So if we can get our act together and actually position ourselves as that supplier of choice, the economic opportunity will be absolutely phenomenal.
Great. I see you nodding your head. And I know you mentioned earlier on that we have everything that we need. It's just a form of, figuring out how we can effectively work to make sure the whole ecosystem is working well. So wondering if you have a response to Brian's comments.
Only a positive response. I think it's important to note, we don't know this, we don't talk about this enough, I don't think, and every room I'm in, people don't usually know this. We are the second largest producer of vehicles in North America. We make sometimes more cars in Michigan, sometimes less, but on average, we're the second. And I can argue that in the future, we're going for the top spot. We're the second, also the second largest ICT cluster, information communication technologies in North America. Again, I would argue that if we look at the numbers now, we're probably number one because a lot of people are coming home from Silicon Valley. And then I don't have to talk to you about critical minerals and mining because everybody knows we've got that. And we're working very hard these days to make sure that those critical minerals stay here and we make them into things. So when you integrate these things and you kind of think back to when the tech sector started to get into the auto sector, back to what Rasika said, we know a lot of people across jurisdictions like ours that make cars got really nervous. Thought, what does this mean for our supply chain? Well, what we did in Ontario said, well, we're going to use this as an opportunity. So we created what's the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network. And the idea was, instead of us going after a piece of the pie, why don't we go after the whole pie together? Let's work in a very coordinated fashion. Let's leverage all the strengths across all our regions and all the actors within our regions and tie them together so that everybody knows that anywhere you go in Ontario, you can get access to equipment, resources, and support to build technologies in all of the new segments that are now becoming the automotive supply chain. And it's not just the established supply chain. We are seeing companies now that have an AI-based solution getting into Nissan's vehicles, and that's something we supported. And so the opportunity for us is not only to continue to support our current suppliers, but to build new suppliers and get them into supply chain. And that's where we will thrive in this very coordinated approach. So if you go from Thunder Bay down to Windsor, Ontario, that is the Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network. And they all work in a very coordinated fashion. And we work together to make sure that we're not only commercializing the technologies and the homegrown companies that will supply the future movement of people and goods, but we're also adopting these technologies because why should we make them and not have those companies knock on our doors in our municipalities and say, hey, can I try this? And the municipality say, what does it do? Well, it makes the roads safer. Well, I like safe roads, so we try that there. And that helps our companies also springboard into the global market because now they have a tested technology and somebody who can vouch for them. So, the opportunity for us is endless. We're working at it, and we're entering more suppliers, new suppliers into the supply chain as we support our existing supply chain to get into this transition, which now is further accelerated by electric vehicles. And again, we've talked about how well we're doing in that regard.
I want to let you stay on that point about critical minerals, just because we might not have the chance to go back to it in the conversation. Maybe we will. But can you give us a snapshot on what's happening upstream?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You're going to test my facts here. So I'll phone a friend. Minister Tassi is smiling when I ask her. No, look, we've always had this critical mineral richness in Northern Ontario, and it's not just Ontario. It's all Canada's got it there. I talk more about Ontario, and it's starting to attract attention globally of the likes of. May I speak on behalf of Volkswagen? No, just kidding. And you look at that and you say, hey, Volkswagen knows we have these minerals, but again, and I say this about myself. I'm not of the generation of Canadians that wants to dig things up and send them away. I'm the generation of Canadians that wants to dig things up or chop things down and make them into value and sell them into new markets. And that opportunity is where we are right now. So we've got all these new mines coming online. We've got great support from governments to help these mines come online. And it's going to take a whole country to do it, and that's okay. We have a whole country, and we have a country that works together. The other thing that I will note is there's other places that have critical minerals, but we're safe. We've got a pretty stable political system, and these are the things that people know, right? They can go somewhere else, but they come here because you talk to the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipal governments are all talking the same thing. They're not, they're working together. And I've been in a meeting where I won't talk about which meeting, but somebody where they said, "Wow, you see a federal minister and a provincial minister sitting there and talking as if they talk all the time. This is unusual." But it's what Canada is. It's who we are, and we work together. We know that we're Team Canada, and we're headed for this future where all the decisions are going to be made soon, and we just can't split hairs on it. So, on the numbers of critical minerals, I can tell you we've got a whole bunch of critical minerals from lithium to cobalt to nickel. And if you were talking to the mayor of Sudbury right now, he may argue, and some companies have told me, we probably have some of the highest grade nickel for battery technology in Ontario that comes out of our ground. And we turn it in, we're going to turn it into technology.
Can I just add one?
Of course.
One statistic on this, and I just think it really gives you the scale of the opportunity. Benchmark Minerals is estimating that if you're going to build the capacity to feed the auto supply chain for all of the lithium batteries that are required, we need 360 new mines globally, 360 over the next decade. So that just gives you a sense, and by no means am I suggesting that Canada could possibly service all of that, but Enercan thinks that potentially 20 mines could come online in Canada. So that's the scale of opportunity here. And as we heard on the last panel, the fact that we have a clean electricity grid is a huge advantage that you are not going to find in a lot of other countries. So, the opportunity is there. And if we just take a fraction of that expected demand for lithium and all the other minerals, I think we're going to see huge prosperity for Canada.
I'll add a fact to that.
Absolutely.
I'll add a fact that we actually and I was sitting with a mining executive on a panel a few weeks ago. We actually have some of the cleanest mines in the world. So that, again, going back to ESG and where the world is going, we have that, we have everything we talked about, but we do it in a very clean way. And we know, our governments know, our people know that we can't strive to build the cars of the future that reduce emissions and create emissions along the way. So government and industry are working tirelessly to make sure that we clean the entire supply chain as we build these cars.
This is actually a great point, I think, for Rachel to jump in. We're eyeing each other. Let's talk about the transition, and let's talk about the transition from the context of doing it sustainably. Talking about, how, I would love your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think I'll start with a couple of things that I think we would describe as myths that get talked about electric vehicles. So first of all, people do kind of ask, well, we're making all this effort. Is it going to be better in the long run if we're digging up all the minerals, other things? So academic studies prove no matter where you are plugging in these vehicles, no matter how dirty the grid, no matter how you've manufactured them or mined them, the life cycle emissions of an electric vehicle is going to be better than a gas-powered vehicle. Point break. If you're talking about a cleaner grid like Ontario, you can get up to 86% less emissions from an electric vehicle than a fossil fuel powered vehicle. So I think it's important first to start with that. Like, this will make a difference. It does have impact. And I think, though, when we're talking about, and then we talked about the scale of mining, I think another fact to kind of put that in context is we're talking about moving from kind of a fossil fuel powered society to a mineral powered society. And so if you look at it in the whole, we're going to need 250 times less mining of critical minerals in 2040 than we had of coal in 2021 to power that, change. So Brian's 100% right. We need a lot new mines to produce our new materials. But I think the picture of we're just going to be digging up a whole lot of places and having localized environmental impacts is true at a localized basis. But globally, we're really talking about less mining. So getting into that localized piece, I think that what we've talked about here in Canada and Ontario's reputation and possibility, where we ranked higher than even the US was on ESG standards in this ranking, and certainly higher than China. And so Canada's never going to produce the cheapest battery, but we can try to produce the cleanest battery. And so ensuring that regulatory and permitting regimes are considering localized impacts. We haven't talked about partnerships with Indigenous communities, but certainly I think Indigenous leaders would say the path to net zero runs through Indigenous lands. So, working on proactive, equity-based, partnership-based approaches to working with communities and dealing with localized ecological impacts are going to be extremely important when we're talking about the kinds of speed and the reputation of Canada being part of the selling feature. So I think those are all important pieces pulling us in different directions around the sustainability of the transition. And if we have time, I'll tell you a little bit of my thoughts on making it also accessible and approachable no matter your economic demographic.
I mean, we can also get into that piece now because I think the other part of this conversation that people are keeping a close eye on is adoption, and we can talk about it specifically as far as adoption goes in Canada. Rachel, maybe I could leave it with you to revisit the point that you just mentioned, but also I'm wondering if you could tell us kind of where we're at in terms of adoption and what industry needs to look out for in terms of kind of the risks of that adoption not, maintaining the growth that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, so Canada in the last quarter, 1 in 10 new cars purchased across Canada was a zero-emission vehicle. In a leading jurisdiction like British Columbia that's had a really supportive policy environment and good incentives, we had 1 in 5 new vehicles in the last quarter purchased were zero emission. But in China, we're looking at numbers like 35% of new vehicles. So we're not leading yet in adoption. That said, we've definitely one of those countries that's hit that S curve of the increasing roller coaster I was describing before. And I think Raska really mentioned, a few of those obstacles along the way. If we're looking at 85% of current EV owners have a dedicated parking spot to go and plug in their car, that makes their whole life very, very easy. And so the next wave is going to be the multi-unit residential building owners, people in more rural settings who may have a fear of adoption that we need to overcome. I think also though, and maybe my theme here is myths and facts a little bit, but one of the things I think, because things are changing so fast, the cost of electric vehicles is coming down while fossil fuel powered vehicles are going up. And so we're seeing, Tesla is not represented on this panel, so I will drop the name here. But in the US, the Model Y Tesla is now cheaper than the average American vehicle. We're really seeing prices come down, and we're going to see cost parity coming over the next decade with a lot of different classes of vehicle. Right now in Canada, we are benefiting from having rebates available across the country. And according to our study, when you look at the lifetime cost of the vehicle and the not having to power it up or fuel it in the same way, lower maintenance costs, you see, and including existing rebates across the country, electric vehicles are often breaking even within the first year in terms of total cost of ownership. And every car we studied over an average 10-year lifespan in every province in the country was cheaper in that long-term lifespan. So what we need to also do is think about the people who are struggling with the upfront cost, how to get a used EV market going for people who aren't purchasing new vehicles. I think those are going to be some of the pieces around making this accessible for that next generation, that next wave of people who will need to be thinking about adoption.
Amazing. Rasika, I think building on that, what are, in your view, some of the specific policy decisions, business decisions that can help accelerate adoption?
Well, I think you've already heard we're producing the batteries in scale to kind of scale up the industry, but we also need customer demand to keep pace with that. And so what really brings affordability into any economy of scale is the scale itself. So to get the masses to adopt the cars in the first place will require things like, hey, what's in it for me? Do I get a tax break to put in that residential charger? Do I have access to public charging for that drive I go to Montreal on that makes me feel comfortable to jump into the cars that already have the range today to accomplish this? But people have evolved from range anxiety to charger anxiety. Where's that charger, and is it working, and is it convenient enough for those longer drives? I think we also need increased literacy. I find it's so interesting when everyone comes to me and says, I always hear infrastructure is the number one concern or the barrier for them to take the plunge and try an electric car. Because once you're in it, you'll actually find it's a superior driving experience. And so when they have this mental block, I start asking them questions like, how long is your commute? Okay, you're hybrid now. How often are you taking it out? How often do you actually drive to Montreal or other places? So really understanding your driving patterns, understanding that the total cost of ownership, like in North America, we tend to have short-term memory and speak the language of biweekly payments instead of how much money am I going to save with car A over B in the next 10 years. So having that literacy start to come in, because there's a lot of very literate people like Rachel who understand the environmental angle, but there's a lot of people who are just trying to put food on the table right now and make their mortgage payments. And we need to evolve beyond just the environmental arguments and show them the cost savings for themselves, but they need to understand that mind shift that's required. so we can get the scale and have more affordable EVs for the masses. But Volkswagen Group's definitely focused on that.
I want to pivot a little bit to the importance of collaboration because it's something that we heard in the opening remarks. It's something that's kind of been echoed on stage now, and it's difficult to kind of imagine the scale of collaboration that needs to take effect for all of this to work. And so I think, Raed, I'm wondering if I could kind of turn it to you to talk about some of the most important kind of partnerships at play in terms of just helping us also just like understand and visualize what a productive ecosystem for EVs can look like in Canada? I know it's a big question, but...
Okay, I've got a big answer. I gotta go rewind for a bit. You know, when we started with this technology being infused into the automotive sector, which is kind of turning it into the mobility sector, where, you know, there's some opportunities where the automakers are kind of going into other areas outside of just building cars. They're looking at what the future is. The best way of explaining is that the tech sector tried to disrupt the auto sector, and the auto sector came back with a vengeance and is disrupting multiple sectors, telecom and insurance and vice versa. But again, that presents opportunities. So we took a collaborative approach, and every jurisdiction was kind of trying to figure out what their future was. We were most concerned about Michigan, obviously, because they're right there, and they're number one. I don't like to say that, but we're number two, and it's all good. So we created this initiative, and you know, we were hoping that would work. And the idea, again, was going back to like collaborating, because there's no point in splitting hairs. There are some people in parts of our province that are better at one technology area or one aspect of what the future looks like than others. And think about a company like Volkswagen that comes here and knocks on our door and says, okay, great, we got, it's a clean, they care about ESG, they care about the environment, the governments work together. Hey, the other selling feature is that you can go anywhere in this province, Ontario, and if Ottawa's not good at something, they'll say, well, you should go talk to our colleagues in Windsor. And this took a lot of work, and it took a lot of working together to make sure that we all know where we play and people work together. And I was just saying the other day to one of the regions, you know, one of the big pushes through Oven was work together, and now they team up against me. It's okay. I'm happy about it because it's good to see it. That's how good our collaboration is. So much so that back in like 2021, Michigan was looking at what their next initiative looked like, and the chief mobility officer called me and said, our industry says, look to Ontario as a way to look at how to structure an initiative like Oven. And I thought that was incredible. You know, if you go from what you tried to do and hoping it's successful to thinking, wow, it's so successful, people want to be like you. And we've now created a partnership with the state of Michigan on technology. On making sure that we help support our companies to utilize that border crossing, which moves a lot of goods across the border. And for people like me from Windsor, Ontario, it's important to me from a personal perspective. I have a lot of family on the other side of the border. So these are these collaborations that we're creating in our province, but also across jurisdictions so that we get the best of all worlds.
Brian, I'm wondering, I can see you nodding. I'm wondering if you have anything to add to that. I mean, not to put you on the spot, but even if there's a specific kind of example of kind of effective collaboration going on in the sector that you could point to.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'd point to what we have seen in response to some of the U.S. policy moves in this space. I really cannot underline how significant it is that the federal government, working with the provincial government, of course, different parties, so working across partisan lines, collaborating to respond to the U.S. When the United States put forward subsidies on a scale that we have never seen before. You know, this could have gone a different way, and it didn't, because of that collaboration, because of that Team Canada approach, and because of the engagement of, it's not just provincial and federal governments. We have auto mayors, for example, the mayors in key auto ridings across Canada, who've worked very collaboratively with industry to make the case for this sector and to ensure that Canada competes. And so all you have to do, the evidence here is clear. $30 billion in new investments since 2020 and more to come. So that to me is the best example of collaboration that I have ever seen, and it is going to benefit Canadians for decades to come.
How do we stay competitive in the face of the IRA?
A great question. Well, first and foremost, we've got to maintain our access into the U.S. market. The majority of vehicle production in Canada is going into the United States. When you look at the Canadian auto market itself, it's actually not that large, but we happen to sit beside this massive market. So on the horizon, we have a USMCA, the United States-Mexico Agreement, is going to go through what's called the Sunset Review, where all three parties will look at the agreement and hopefully renew it. But that's going to be a huge priority for government to make sure that we're well positioned for that. And then secondly, as we saw when the IRA first came out, having that Canadian presence in the United States, constantly reminding the Americans about the importance of Canada as part of the integrated North American auto market is going to be critical. You know, this transformation is highly competitive. I know China was mentioned in terms of their production of electric vehicles ramping up massively. We cannot win in this transformation if we don't compete as an integrated North American market. That has always been what's underpinned this industry. So going forward, I think it's always important that we just remind our American friends that we're a key part of that. And with the critical minerals that we can bring, we're actually going to help the Americans reduce their dependence on the Chinese dominated battery supply chain. About 80% of battery materials right now for EV batteries are going through China one way or another. We've got to reduce that dependence, and I would argue that Canada is the country to help make that happen.
We've somehow come down to close to the end of our time. Unfortunately, I do want to go down the line and give everyone an opportunity to kind of share a parting thought about, you know, if there was one thing that we could do to help accelerate this transition, to make it move more efficiently, what would that be? Brad, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. I think my panel colleagues have well covered the adoption side of things, but I would just note one additional point. Canada is a very unique country because we have a large rural population. About 18% of our population lives in rural areas. We've got over 1 million kilometers of two-lane public road, and we have a cold climate. So we have very unique challenges that a lot of other countries won't face when it comes to EV adoption. For this to succeed, we've got to bring all Canadians along. So if there's one thing that I think we should be doing, let's not forget about rural Canadians. Let's make sure that we're building infrastructure everywhere, and let's make sure that we're giving people incentives to make this transition to electrification.
Right?
My turn. So, I would say that vehicle production is very important. We're working very tirelessly to get more cars here. And I use the example of if you go to a dealership now, they don't show you the electric vehicles yet. But in a few years, they'll be at the front of the lot and the gas-powered vehicles will be at the back of the lot. So as we continue to work to get more vehicles produced, that creates more options for consumers. And then that supports adoption. It also brings the unit costs down. So it becomes more accessible. The other thing I would say is, and I use this all the time, saying for the third time, I'm from Windsor, so Detroit's right next to me. This is Detroit 120 years ago, around. This is our opportunity to build new companies, our opportunity to build new technologies, maybe even our opportunity for our own domestic car company, because electric vehicles are this new thing, like gas-powered cars were 120 years ago. So I would say, if I were to say, leave it apart, let's be ambitious. This is our opportunity to be ambitious. This is our time. Right now, if we're going to shoot our shot, we shoot it now. And so, we have the right environment. We have the support of government at all levels. We've got everything you need here in Canada. We're working together. We need to be ambitious and take our shot right now. And at the end of the day, when it all shakes up, I will agree, and I hope everybody else will, that we will be on top as we have been and as we will continue to be.
Rachel?
I think a big theme here has been cooperation, and I think that falls in attracting investment. I think great to open comments from Welland. That's what we need to be doing. Municipalities need to be proactive. They've done a great job in Quebec with Investissement Québec and Bécancour in generating communities that are based around this industry and really pulling in investments to fight off the many other jurisdictions that are doing it. So the more local, provincial, other partnerships that can be doing that, the better. Cooperation on the other side, many of us sit and talk at different tables around public confidence. How do we talk about vehicles to increase their confidence? How do we build out for the people who are going to have a harder time finding this as accessible today? How do we think about their needs? And how do we build literacy collectively to make sure people understand there are EVs out there today that can solve these problems, that drive 400 kilometers at a time, that are going to save you money? So how do we increase collective literacy?
I agree with everything said here, and I think my parting thoughts would be, it's not just a one-time effort. This is a marathon, not a sprint. But it feels like a sprint because 100% electric by 2035 is just 12 years away. So what that really takes is a consistent North Star that it's always electric. We regardless of political stripes, there's both economic and environmental drivers behind this. So we just need a consistent North Star. And in terms of Canada and its role, we need to play to our strengths. So incentives aside, there's going to be global competition as every country tries to attract clean investment. But we have a fairly clean grid already, but we also need to incentivize more renewable energy and make it low cost, abundant, and affordable so that our industrial manufacturing can keep up and have access to that. And we're also, don't underestimate the value of trust. Canadians are trustworthy, that we are a nation that attracts business because relationships are important in business. So be trustworthy, be collaborative, don't be divisive, because that's how we can attract investment and attract people saying, hey, because we're collaborative and we're a small country, we can do things quickly. So let's be optimistic and seize the opportunity.
What a big, exciting topic. What an amazing panel to tackle it. Let's give everyone a hand. Yeah, I hope this plants a seed for many interesting conversations as you go along in the forum. So very pleased to welcome on stage now Matt Cisco, the Mayor of St. Catharines, who will offer some closing remarks.
Thank you so much. I want to, first of all, thank the speakers and the panelists for a fantastic job. They definitely had the hardest job. This one's easy for me, just reading off a page, but another round of applause for the panelists because I think they did a fantastic job. As mentioned, I am the mayor of St. Catharines. I'm also a proud member of the Auto Mayors Caucus. And in St. Catharines, we're one of 12 municipalities in the Niagara region. I wanted to start this afternoon by just thanking Minister Tassi. The minister was in Niagara recently making announcements, which included a lot of work by the team at FedDev Ontario and a $4 million investment in FBT Inc., one of our homegrown success stories and another key player in the EV sector. That investment's going to help them increase their productivity, but also provide another 40 skilled jobs and support the domestic manufacturing capacity in Ontario and in our Niagara region. Listening to the panel today, I think we all heard a number of different things. As Brian Kingston led off with, though, and everybody reiterated, collaboration is very clearly key, not just across the three levels of government, but also industry, academia, the private sector. All have to contribute to the job retention and the job creation that the EV industry can create, the skills development, the reduced carbon emissions, the increased economic development opportunities. Climate change is obviously the driving force behind the EV sector, but it's influencing it in a variety of different ways. It's driving the regulatory changes. It's increasing the consumer demand for clean transportation. It's fostering innovation and investment through sustainability. It's impacting supply chains. It's influencing grid dynamics. It's requiring us to bring on adaptation strategies, and it's changing the competitive landscape. These influences collectively will shape the development and the growth of the EV industry, as it plays a vital role in mitigating climate change by reducing emissions from the transportation sector. And as has been stated by multiple different levels of government, we are all there at the table ready to support. The Niagara region specifically continues to exert its pull on investors from around the globe with a storied history of innovation and industrial roots that are older than the country itself. We understand the importance of the transformational changes taking place in the EV auto sector and the positive impact global investors like General Motors, Linamar, Magna, Van Est, EVSX, and THK Rhythm Automotive have on our regional, provincial, and federal economy. Their continued reinvestment in EV technology serves not only as a cornerstone to our continued and collective economic recovery, but further underscores the enduring diversity that is propelling Canada, Ontario, and Niagara's new economy into the future. Since its inception, both St. Catharines and Niagara have been shaped by the tireless efforts of the visionaries and leaders in this industry. Their dedication has resulted in the development of a bustling region that now commands a substantial and a growing presence on the global stage. With half of North America's population within a one-day drive, Niagara is the ideal location to easily connect with customers and suppliers. And the trade that flows across Niagara's borders totals more than $100 billion. It supports hundreds of thousands of jobs across Canada and the United States. And the infrastructure network that supports this includes 5 international bridges, multiple railway corridors, and the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway System, which links Niagara to the Atlantic seaboard. Now, as the mayor of St. Catharines, I have to acknowledge our deep appreciation for the significance of the automotive industry. I'm also the son-in-law to a 32-year worker in the GM Forge in St. Catharines, along with multiple other members of the family. The auto industry has a profound influence in St. Catharines and Niagara. The Niagara Economic Development's 10-year economic development strategy outlines manufacturing as a core industry of focus, along with EV and battery manufacturing and electrification as emerging sectors that can complement our future growth and prosperity. General Motors' ongoing commitment to the St. Catharines propulsion plant, as mentioned earlier today, stands as a pivotal element in driving our community's economic resurgence, further validating that the strategy in Niagara is working. Collectively, we can proudly trace back a legacy of more than a century, marked by collaborative innovation, steadfast leadership, and unwavering resilience. Reinvesting in the St. Catharines propulsion plant to manufacture the new Ultium electric drive units supports more than 500 jobs at the facility, and it serves as a cornerstone in the economic recovery and growth of Niagara. Like many municipalities across Southern Ontario, manufacturing continues to play a crucial role in our community. And the EV investments not only sustain an important sector of our economy, but they align with several of our long-term strategic goals of being a dynamic, innovative, and sustainable community. The Niagara region, along with its 12 municipal partners, boasts a rich and enduring legacy in the manufacturing industry. This legacy is poised to extend well into the 21st century as we continue to facilitate a favorable environment for EV industrial sector investments and reinvestments in the Niagara area. Thank you.